in true Madison fashion, I only have about 30 minutes to film this, so this is going to be kind of a rapid fire as I can be of all people, rapid fire update of everything I have done in the month of September for writing. So usually I divide these videos into 3 parts. I talk about things I have been enjoying with my writing, talk about things I've been learning, and then I talk about what is coming next for the upcoming month. This time, and this relates to one of the lessons that I learned this month, all the progress that I made wasn't really easy to fit into those 2 categories. Every single piece of work that I did included both things I enjoyed and was learning. So rather than divide everything into those sections like I usually do, I'm just going to tell you what I did this month and talk about why it's been enjoyable and what I have been learning from it, and then talk to you about what is supposed to happen in the month of October as far as writing goes. So I'm gonna go ahead and just begin and go as quickly as I can. So a few months ago, I read Story Genius by Lisa Cron. I think I've talked about this in another video. I liked a lot of what Story Genius had to offer, but at the same time, there was a lot of it that I didn't necessarily agree with, or not necessarily disagree with either, but that formatting method didn't necessarily work for the project that I was working on at the time. But at the same time, I thought there was quite a bit of wisdom in it. So this time I did try to do the Story Genius approach as I started beginning work on this new project, and it didn't work again, at least not the way that I wanted it to. One of the things that you're supposed to do with characters in the Story Genius method is you talk about who they are, you give a character sketch, you talk about their defining misbelief about themselves, and that's, I think, a phrase you will see kind of more commonly now on other writers' channels. It's a phrase that keeps cropping up in relation to this book, or at least from the people that I follow who have also used the wisdom from this book. A character's defining misbelief is a big idea. So you go over their defining misbelief, then you write your origin scene where that misbelief took root, and then you're supposed to write 3 turning point scenes where that continues to become truer and truer to them in their own mind. And then from there, you kind of start breaking that down into scene ideas and into scene sheets. So I began that way. I started off with my main character. I wrote out her character sketch. I talked about her defining misbelief. I wrote the origin scene, and then I looked at having to come up with 3 turning point scenes, and I just said, I don't want to do that. And it wasn't out of a sense of, oh, that's intimidating, or I just don't feel like it. Just looking at the story that I have in front of me, I was like, I just don't feel like I need to. And I had other work I wanted to do first. So it just wasn't working for me. And I think there is still wisdom in beginning with those things, and maybe that's a method I will work towards using in maybe another project at some point. I don't know, but I like the wisdom that's there. The format that she presents doesn't necessarily jive with what I'm trying to do or the way that I work. So I tried to take the wisdom that is there, but I applied it to my own methodology and formatting because it just wasn't working for me. So that's where I began this month. So instead, I used a method that I tend to enjoy more. And if you have seen my other writing update videos, I believe the one that I used this in was in May or June. This is a method also that I have used since I was in high school, but it's the idea of taking all these scenes that need to happen, color coordinating them by character, and arranging them as I need. So taking the idea of the misbelief that Lisa Cron talks about in Story Genius and using that methodology that I like to use, I came up with this monstrosity. It's a very big poster board again. So I stuck with the idea of a misbelief. I like that idea. I like that there is some belief a character has about themselves that they have to wrestle with throughout a story. And I agree that that is the heart and the meat of stories that people are telling, and that's why so many stories seem to fall flat, because it's too focused on the external plot and what's happening without looking so much at the internal conflict. So I like that advice, and I think it's important, and that is because I am writing a coming-of-age novel that is so much more character-driven and slice of life. That is very important to me to be able to have that element. So I did this instead. This story is supposed to be divided into about 4 years of time. I won't be going into detail through all 4 years, that's a little bit too much, but I like the idea of being able to follow that misbelief and how it changes throughout the story. So here are my 5 main characters. This is our main narrator. We will have other chapters from these 3. I don't think we'll have chapters from this one. This is the titular character, but I don't think we're going to have his perspective. Maybe once or twice, I haven't decided yet, but mainly we're here, and then these ones are also important and will be filling in the rest of the gaps for the reader. What I did is I started up here with the misbelief, the defined misbelief they begin with, and then I ended up over here where at the very end I wanted to see how that belief had changed. So I'm using this to track for each of those segments, for each of those years that we go through, each of those sections, how it is evolving and changing. So I followed the same idea, but it just wasn't the way that it was formatted in the book or the way she was recommending you do it. It didn't work for me. So I've done this instead. And this was a lot of fun. Is it a little frustrating and a little intimidating still? Yeah, but it was still fun. So basically all that is to say this is what I did instead, because this is just what worked better for me. I have filled in every section. I'm not necessarily married to the way that they all evolve, and I have been erasing and rearranging and doing a lot of work with kind of fidgeting with how these ideas ideas evolve throughout the story, but at least I know now where every character begins, what they believe about themselves and the world at the beginning of the story, and how that changes by the end. So I have at least a trajectory for everybody in progress, and if I need to fidget with that as I continue to write, that's fine, but this is what I did instead, because it was a lot more useful to me overall. Then sticking with the sticky note method, something that I've been meaning to do all month and that I only just sat down to start working on literally yesterday, was I started doing the next step that Story Genius recommends, which is writing down all the scenes that you can conceive of for the story and just start to chip away at those and figure out where they fit and why they matter, etc. So the method that I wanted to do is create a poster board for every character, write down all their scenes, figure out where they belong in the story, kind of why they matter to them, and then eventually I will do what I did with the other project I was working on, where I will remove those sticky notes from each individual poster board and arrange them in the chronological order that I want. So yesterday, I will show you, I started these 3 things. So here's main character, our main narrator. Her name is Claire, by the way. That's her poster board. And then you have Stevie, one of our other narrators, and Ronnie, one of the others. I've only just started Ronnie's, and she's a lot more vague to me, so I'm working on that still. I still have to do Charlie's, and Simon, the titular character, I don't know if I'll do one for him yet, but that was my next step that I wanted to work on. That's what I started yesterday, where I kind of just word vomit all my scene ideas onto the page. I figure out who they belong to, and I can kind of see in this way where I need to fill in the gaps. Because some of them, looking chronologically, like, for example, my character Stevie, I have a lot of stuff for her in the last 2 years of the story, but year 2 is just empty. And I'm noticing that trend for all of them, is that years 1, 3, and 4 are pretty full, but the second year, kind of like the middle part, I still haven't quite figured out yet. So I can see where I'm missing gaps and spaces and what I need to fill in and what's missing. So that's been really useful as well. I will continue to work on that throughout the next month. I only just got started yesterday, and I am leaving out of town at the beginning of next month, so it's going to be a minute before I get back to it, but it's at least started, which is great. With this too, it's useful because I am planning to tell this story non-chronologically. I like the idea of going back and forth between timelines, back and forth between years, so that you have that character tension. You can see kind of this thing that we're working up towards. That is something I'm playing with, is telling the story non-chronologically. I think I need to write it chronologically first, and then I can rearrange, but this way I can move sticky notes around and see, okay, what's the actual chronological order, and then go back and look at how I need to arrange it so that it has all the right emotional punches at the right time if I do it non-chronologically. So that's the progress that I have made this month. That's what I've been working on. It's been a lot of rearranging my approach. All of these things were things that I enjoyed but also struggled with. They were things I was having fun with while also learning from them. So I have 2 big takeaways from this month that I want to share. The first one was figuring out my methodology as I go. So again, I noticed this when I was working on the last project that I have now set aside for a little bit, where I was so strict about, like, well, this is the way that this author said I should do it, so I'm going to follow all of their steps to a T, and I cannot stray from that structure or I'm doing it wrong. And I wouldn't know because I'm not one of the greats. I'm not a published author. I don't know how this works, clearly, so I have to listen to what they say. And I always ended up writing myself into a rut doing that, or I'd get frustrated, or I felt kind of bogged down by all these steps that I was supposed to be doing. And so I challenged that this time, like I did with my main character, with Claire, where I got halfway through the Story Genius method, wanting to give it another try because I thought this genre fit that methodology better, and being okay to say, you know, that's not working for me. You know, what will work for me though is if I take this idea and I do it this way. So not being so strict about the methodology and learning what works for me has been a lot of fun, because it's teaching me about myself and the way that my brain works and the way that I can be successful and productive as a writer as I'm working on this project. But also it's been a learning experience because I keep hitting walls and running up against obstacles and having to say, what's not working here and what can I do that makes sense in Madison's brain that maybe doesn't necessarily translate to the advice that has been given to me. So that's been an interesting, enjoyable, and learning experience, is figuring out how I approach a story when I don't follow a structure that has been given to me, how Madison in her own writer brain decides to approach setting things up to get things written. That's been really fascinating and tricky at the same time. And the second takeaway is very similar, but it's its own thing still, and that's that studying previously established story structure is useful, but I don't necessarily have to be religious about it. So something that I have been looking at as I prepare to start taking on this novel in November is looking at the narrative and character arcs of other coming-of-age stories, looking at slice-of-life stories, kind of figuring out, okay, what are the story beats that need to happen here. And that's advice that comes from Brandon Sanderson that I think is very useful. That's from his lectures that are on YouTube for free. That is something that you should be doing as a writer, right? Is studying other story structures, looking at other works within the genre that you're working in and saying, okay, how did they do it? But there's still the responsibility of the writer to do it in their own way. So I studied those structures and I started to feel this sense of, oh no, I have to do it that way. Or if I don't have this story beat, I don't have this particular type of character, then I'm not doing this correctly, or I'm not being faithful to the genre, or I've missed a step and it's not going to be good if I don't have it. And having to be okay with changing those things, or saying, yes, all of these plot beats and ideas from this genre are happening, but not these, 2 or 3 that are standard, and being okay with that. There's a lot that I have learned from studying previously established story structure, like 3-act structure and like coming of age narratives. Studying those is useful, but also there comes a point where I can't be so religious about it that I try to shove my own story into that mold. So again, they're 2 very similar takeaways, but I think they are slightly different enough to be 2 separate takeaways, like I said at the beginning. But this month has been a lot of learning what my process is and still trying to make progress without being so concerned and intimidated by the fact that I might be straying from advice that other writers have given. Because I have to accept that I am also a writer, and this is the way that I like to do it. And it might not work. I might find that this methodology that I'm using still has a bunch of gaps and holes that I need to fill with advice from other writers, which is why I try to study and apply as much as I can, or at least I'm trying to. So yeah, that's what this month has been. It's been a lot of poster boards. There's only a few of them. I have at least 1 more coming, maybe 2, maybe 3. I think when I get to the point of taking all the sticky notes off and having to arrange them chronologically, I might need to spread some butcher paper out on a wall and do it that way, because it's just not going to fit on these little things, But yes, working with the poster boards and the sticky notes, figuring out what's missing in the story, figuring out who my characters are, what they believe and what their trajectory is, what the theme of the story is and how I want to weave that into the plot, figuring out what a slice of life coming of age story means, learning what works and what doesn't as far as advice from established storytelling techniques and other writers, etc. Learning what works for me, learning what I still need to learn and do and accomplish. So yeah, it's been both a weird and a very productive month because I had to keep switching gears. I had to keep looking at those obstacles and saying, okay, rather than getting frustrated and quitting, what can I learn from this and how can I adjust it to something that works for me? And I think the next month is probably going to be a lot of that as well. I want to finish up the work that I've been doing, but the next big thing is I have to create an outline. I have to figure out what way I want the story to be written in. And it may end up being that I have a chapter outline, but that I write it chronologically still, or maybe I do write it non-chronologically. I haven't decided. So next month is going to be figuring out all of those things and getting as set up as I can for NaNoWriMo starting on November 1st. I will be out of town next week. I'm also going to be out of town the first week of NaNoWriMo, so having to just look at my schedule overall and arrange how I'm doing things has been a little chaotic and tricky, but that's okay. Once I am home in October, the plan is to continue working on this, figuring out how I want to approach the project in November, whether that is in chronological order and I just get the thing written, or if I want to write it non-chronologically. We'll find out. I don't know. But the idea is figure out what the story is supposed to be, what are the plot beats that absolutely need to happen, what's still missing, fill all that in so that I am ready to begin on November 1st. That's pretty much it. I don't have any other videos coming up that I know of besides my October writing update at the end of October. I don't think I will be doing any other book reviews anytime soon. If that changes, obviously you'll know, but this might be it for a little while until I see you later, because things are very busy this upcoming month and I want to make sure I'm getting the work done so that I actually have something to talk about when I do my writing update videos like this. Thank you for tuning in as always and for being interested in what I have to say. I don't know that I am quite the fount of wisdom, but it's been helpful for me to be able to reflect on the things that I have been doing and to share it with all of you. So thank you for listening and supporting me. As always, you can also find me on Instagram and Goodreads. Those links are below. If you're curious to see what else I'm up to, what else I'm doing the rest of the year, and you're okay with the rather chaotic format that it has become as the year has gone on, you can also subscribe below. In the meantime though, happy reading, happy writing. I will chat with you all soon.